All right, guys, super psyched to have here in the flesh, in the studio, the one and only economics reporter for the Washington Post, who we rely on here so much, Jeff Stein. Great to see you. We haven't seen you since the pandemic. It's great to see you in person.
Way too long.
Dude, it has been a long time. I don't think we'd actually never met before. We only met him via Skype, so it's fantastic.
Have we never had you in the Rising studio?
I think this is the first time.
This is the first time, and I believe it was like on a lark. I was like, I had a pretty good tweet the other day. I was like, got some good instincts. Let's have this guy on the show.
Give this guy a shot.
Give him a shot. Let's see how it works out.
And
it
keeps
did.
carrying water for Bezos over there.
Right. Yeah, that's right.
I know with Joe Rogan, you guys have to figure out some way to like keep upping the ante for quality of guests.
Right. So that's what we do here.
So I'm happy to fill that role.
That's why we got you here, which is why we wanted to start with the most important issue, which is how could you possibly choose Crunchwrap Supreme over Cheesy Gordita Crunch, which is clearly the superior item on the menu?
I'm not really sure I can ever be on the show again.
Right.
Given that statement, it's really.
You're both crazy for not getting
where you rip the mic off and walk out.
You're both crazy for not getting those Doritos
three
Locos
for you right now.
You know what's
the
actually
Dorito shell.
highly underrated, and then we're going to stop the Taco Bell commercial because
we promise.
We're anti-corporate. We're not getting paid for this, guys. We just have a genuine affection for their products. Have you had the spicy potato soft taco? It's like a little underrated. It's
the spicy potato soft taco.
It's very good.
Right.
Wow.
Add that to your Crunchwrap.
Yum Brands, if you're listening.
That's right. That's right.
We will happily accept free tacos here at Breaking Points. I just want to be and speak for that.
All
but
right,
let's get to the serious
Sagar
stuff.
probably has a serious question.
Okay, let's throw this up there on the screen. Jeff, we used to have you on all the time from CNBC just about jobless claims. Jobless claims show a surprise increase to highest level in a month. There's a lot of discourse around this. We actually talked a little bit about on Rogan, which is that, is this an unemployment crisis? Is that people just quitting their jobs? Is it a great reassessment of work in America? First of all, what do you think? And then more importantly, what do the policymakers think? And what are they going to do about this?
So to start with what the policymakers think, they are convinced, and I think it's pretty safe to say at this point that it's really not just Republicans, it's Democrats and some people in the White House and the business lobbyists that have the ear of Congress, that what is happening is that the unemployment benefits are too large, it's discouraging people from working, and that is leading to people staying home, and also with the unemployment benefits expiring in September, that people might be availing themselves of that by staying home.
Sure.
All the workers you talk to say that this is obviously a preposterous notion, that workers need to be paid more to be able to come back to work, that they had, many of them had quite a realization during COVID that life is short and that they don't want to be doing jobs that they found brutal, often oppressive, with terrible bosses. And there's been what my colleague Heather Long, I think very aptly called sort of a great rethink going on right now, not just really in the service sector, but in sort of America writ large, where people, white-collar jobs that are rough, even people who are working at law firms getting paid well, a lot of those people, you hear stories about tremendous signing bonuses because people are having trouble finding young associates who are willing to come in. You're seeing in this country that the pandemic opened these sort of new vistas for people to really rethink, what is my job? Where do I want to work? What kind of job do I want to have? And you're coupling that with a lot of sort of supply chain uncertainty coming out of the recession. A lot of suppliers are really struggling to match demand that was poured in through the stimulus. And I think I'm really glad you guys opened with this, because that is a tremendously scary sign. Federal policymakers are, leaning very aggressively towards taking off federal support, and yet we're seeing that tons of people are still out of work. Unemployment claims are still elevated, but by dramatic levels from where they were before COVID, and there's really little appetite in Washington. I mean, there's almost universal consensus at this point that the unemployment benefits need to go away. I get questions about it all the time. Can you push lawmakers on this? And there's not even a window for those kinds of questions. It's just not even on the table. There's no talk of a fourth stimulus check whatsoever. It's like the number one question I get. And these unemployment benefits are sure to end in September.
Wow. Something that actually Sagar likes to point out, which I think is really important to underscore, is there was a choice made at the beginning of the pandemic for how economically we're going to respond. In some countries around the world, what they decided to do was basically backstop payrolls. So people effectively stayed in the jobs that they had. They stayed attached to those jobs. We took a different course. We pushed people more towards the unemployment program. It seems like that's helping to create this churn and this great reset or awakening or whatever you want to call it. I think reset has other conspiratorial,
don't say great reset,
connotations. So forget that I said that one. But this great rethink of how people want to spend their days. In America, for so long, we've been taught and made to make work our like center of our identity. So it seems like at the white collar professional level, you have people who are saying, you know, I actually kind of liked having time with my kids. I got used to working from home. Maybe I don't want to live in this giant city. We want to move somewhere cheaper and continue working from home and have less hours and sort of rebalance a life. Lower down the spectrum, you have people who, as you're pointing out, they were maybe in industries that were really hard hit. They lost their jobs, or they were in industries where they're shoved down on the front lines with very little regard to their own safety, put at risk. They're saying, I don't want to go through this again. So do you think that those choices at the very beginning of the pandemic from a policy perspective helped create this rethink that we're seeing now?
That's a really deep question. I hadn't quite thought about it like that. I mean, I think when the U.S., the U.S. did try to do this. They had the Paycheck Protection Program, which was in theory money to employers that then they would use to keep their workers retained, at least, even if they weren't coming into the office. They were still an idle worker. But the amazing thing about the U.S. is that our social infrastructure and our economic infrastructure is so decrepit from 40 years of cuts that we didn't have the infrastructure to do what the European countries did by keeping workers at least nominally attached to their jobs. And that's what led to so many people, as you accurately pointed out, getting into unemployment. And I think you're right that did cause this bit of disconnection between, that wasn't the case in other countries, between the job and people's daily lives. And you also saw, the unemployment benefits came through in such weird and strange ways. And people, even if they got a tremendous amount of unemployment benefits, they went months and months without them. So like a lot of people that I talked to would go like 3 or 4 months. And in that period, people would have to move, they'd move back home, they'd take up new hobbies, they'd explore different interests. And that kind of period was, I think, very crucial for people to say exactly what you're describing. I'm not sure that this is what I want to be doing the rest of my life. Especially, you read stories of like, young people who've just worked at a gas station for their entire lives under a terrible boss. Why are they going to go back to that? And the idea that we might actually be empowering workers to have a little bit of leverage in negotiation with employers is something that's very, very radical, if still so transient and so small, and still this brief, tenuous moment that's probably going to evaporate in the next few months. It's a very weird time and an interesting time to be an economics reporter.
Let's talk about it in the context of DC then, and what's next. So we've got infrastructure, there's all these reconciliation packages, there's supposedly bipartisan groups, and then sometimes they fall apart. I can't even really keep up.
Yeah, you
probably.
sent out a tweet that I read like 10 times. You're like, he stopped negotiating with the bipartisan group, but now he's negotiating with like,
the group of 20,
like,
the
what?
G20, and then the group of 7, and then the group of 9, and there are too many groups.
If the tweets are impossible to understand, you have to keep reading.
Yeah, okay, all right. Keep reading. So all of that, what the hell is going on? Are we going to get an infrastructure package? What's going to be in it? Who are the primary players involved? What is the White House thinking?
So for a long time, like my sources on the left have been kind of like hearing from their buddies in the White House that this bipartisan infrastructure play is just a show meant to convince Manchin and Sinema that the White House is really trying to do a bipartisan deal. And I totally think that's wrong. Like, I think the White House really wants this. I think they're determined to do what Trump couldn't do, which is to say, I got a bipartisan $1 trillion infrastructure deal. We're going to fix the roads and bridges. This is a little like congressional insiders stuff. But one of the big problems right now is that to pass the required measures to do physical infrastructure, roads, bridges, ports, that requires 60 votes for that specific physical infrastructure piece.
Right.
So there's a lot of people in the Democratic caucus who are saying we have to do the 60 votes to get that part of it, right? But people on the left are saying, the roads and bridges and ports, that's really important, but it's not climate change, which is, remember climate change like a really big deal.
Yeah, it's a big deal.
Big deal. And if we don't ensure that we tackle climate change in this bill, we are missing potentially our last chance, really, to prevent 3 or 4 degrees of warming, right? So it might be nice to have these people also support the roads and bridges and ports, but they're saying, let's not take this gamble where we're going to go and do a bipartisan deal, get the 60 votes for the roads, bridges, and ports, but with something that Republicans will support, which means invariably it will not have adequate climate measures as Democrats see it. And so that's becoming the core fight right now in Washington. Can Democrats trust that if they do this bipartisan bill on infrastructure with roads, ports and bridges, that Sinema and Manchin will be there for a second bill that does the climate component.
Yeah.
That's like, I think, the most important question right now. And I don't think anybody really knows how that's going to shake out. To trust that they will come back and do it is something that, you're increasingly hear AOC, Pramila Jayapal say, like, why are we going to have faith that this is going to happen? We need to say no until we get the climate components in there. So you're going to hear more of that for sure in the next couple of weeks.
That's interesting, because that was my big question, is the assumption seemed to be, if we pass this bipartisan infrastructure thing, then Manchin's going to feel like he had cover, he did the bipartisan thing, and he'll go along with another reconciliation. But we don't actually know that that's the case, right?
Yeah,
that's just like a theory.
I mean, it's possible that Manchin called Biden and said, like, hey, I got your back on the next one. Like, I am not aware of that, but that has not been reported. None of my White House sources have heard of something like that. Theoretically, maybe he's giving these private assurances that he's going to be on board for the next one, but until there's like some indication of that, I don't think we should just take that on blind faith.
And then how close are the two sides on even the narrow infrastructure piece, which is Biden's original proposal was how much, $2 trillion?
Yes.
And now that we're talking about 500 million in new spending, is that, or 500 billion in new spending? Is that where we are?
Yeah, it's about $1 trillion in total infrastructure spending. Half of that money is new spending, so about 500 billion. So yeah, a big decline from what Biden initially proposed.
And do we have agreement on the pay for it? Because Republicans were proposing basically an increase in the gas tax, right? Which I know Democrats have been opposed to, and user fees also on electric vehicles as well. Is that still where they are?
It is really interesting that one of the ways they're talking about, at this moment of climate emergency, what if we put an additional
What if we
fee
disincentivize
on
electric cars?
vehicles?
Yeah.
I think in general, when you look at the pay for discussion and the negotiations generally, having now done like a few of these, it always looks like no. Like they have all these obstacles. But I think there's like definitely a path for an agreement. The pay for, as you said, is the most tricky part. They released like 11 like ideas for pay fors, but nothing specific, like no numbers behind them. So among the biggest ones are like repurposing COVID money. That could be dicey, but there's probably room there given that Democrats are seemingly open to taking, leftover money from COVID relief, either unemployment or state aid. Closing the tax gap seems to be one that they could maybe compromise on. Republicans don't seem to characterize that as a tax increase. You just increase IRS enforcement. There's a lot of money there. There could be $500, $600 billion there.
Gotcha.
So I think there is a window. We are really waiting for details, and the idea of disincentivizing EVs is going to be something that I think is going to be really hard for a lot of Democrats, I think, to take. But there's a path for sure.
So what's the timeline on this, Jeff? I've heard what? So they said the September deadline is too close, which I found incredible. It just tells you a lot about Congress. Is the August recess still on? I don't know if anybody's going to screw with that. And when is this thing actually going to pass? I know that the original reconciliation window they were looking, that's not going to happen. So now they're going to move to the next one. What's it look like?
I think if you measure in like Jeff Stein breaking points appearance,
yes, yeah.
3 from now.
Okay, 3
That's
from
pretty
now.
soon,
Got it.
actually.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, you're looking good.
I think there's a pretty good shot of the bipartisan one passing in September, and then we spend like the last year before the midterms and this like drag out fight over whether childcare and taxes on the rich and climate measures get passed, and it's like a giant mess for the next year.
Got it.
And then finally, what are your sources on the left saying about their strategy? We're hearing a little bit of, public, certainly complaints, AOC floating, hey, we may not be there for you on this smaller infrastructure deal if climate change isn't involved. Do you think they're actually going to take a hard line? Have they developed a strategy yet?
I think at this point, like if they were to vote on what they've proposed, the squad would vote against it. Most of the Congressional Progressive Caucus would vote against it, but I don't think that's going to be nearly enough to kill it. They don't have the votes. I mean, they get a lot of attention. They're sort of more interesting ideologically to cover than a lot of the centrist Democrats, but the bulk of the caucus is going to be, especially people, who want to go in, New Hampshire and swing Senate seats and swing House seats. The thinking in the caucus is this is a good thing to run on for re-election, to say that I helped bring about a bipartisan deal. I helped fix, your roads and bridges in your home community. And that might be a real political incentive. But I don't think the left has the votes to kill this on the climate grounds at this point.
Good to see you, sir. And for everybody, thank you all for sticking with us. It's been a crazy week. We were on Joe Rogan. We were in Austin. Crystal just got back last night, very late at night. I flew like a normal person. I got on an airplane. All of that being said, we will be back next week. All regularly scheduled programming, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday show. Everything is going to be crisp and beautiful from now on. I hope so. Hope you guys enjoyed that graphic down there. As always, you guys can watch this show, not as clips, but fully uncut and an hour early if you become a Breaking Points Premium member. All the links, description, everything there. Ask Me Anythings. You also get to listen to it uncut as a podcast. All that good stuff. 100% powered by Supercast, who we love and has been a great partner to us. And we will see you all on Monday.
Have a great weekend, guys. See you soon.